The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my sunroom, deadheading the geraniums. My hands were in the soil, and for a moment, everything was peaceful. Then the phone rang. A woman's voice, bright as the resort brochures I used to hide under my mattress, said, "Hello, this is Alara from the Crystal Shores Resort and Spa. We're just confirming your children's activities for the family package next month." My fingers froze mid-snip. A single, perfect blossom fell to the floor. My daughter, Sarah, and my son, Michael, had told me they were both swamped. Buried in work projects. They'd be off the grid for a week, they said. They'd asked me, with such weary sighs, to collect their mail. To water Sarah's fussy ficus tree. They painted a picture of fluorescent lights and stress, of laptops glowing in dark hotel rooms. I believed them. A mother's first instinct is to believe her children. And then, as Alara's cheerful voice hung in the air, my iPad erupted. A FaceTime call. From Sarah. The screen lit up with a thumbnail image, a postcard delivered directly into the heart of my quiet kitchen. There they were. All of them. Sarah and Michael, sun-kissed and smiling, their spouses, my 3 beautiful grandchildren, all squinting against a sun that wasn't shining here. Behind them, not a conference room, but a turquoise ocean. A paradise. A family vacation. Without me. I didn't answer. I watched the call pulse, a visual heartbeat of their betrayal, until it went to voicemail. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. In that silence, something broke. But it wasn't my heart. Not anymore. It was the last fragile thread of denial. And through that crack, something else crept in. A cold, clear plan. You see, I'd been saving for a dream vacation for years. A trip I'd always, foolishly, planned to take with them. The money sat in a special account, a secret fund of hope. And the confirmation email from Crystal Shores that Alara so kindly forwarded to me, it gave me everything I needed. Their reservation number. Their check-in date. The room type. The lie, fully itemized. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because what I did next wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming my joy from the wreckage of their lie. It was about teaching them that some quiet women have been paying attention for a very, very long time. And if you love stories where a grandmother turns the tables with nothing but her wit and a well-timed credit card, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more. To understand the depth of that cut, you have to know what our family used to be. Back when a vacation wasn't something you were excluded from, but the thing you saved all year for, coin by coin, dreaming together around a worn-out kitchen table. My name is Clara, and this is my story. The heart of our home wasn't just a place, it was a ritual. Every Sunday, without fail, the smell of roasting chicken and warm bread would fill my little house, and they would come. Sarah with her perfectly arranged salad, Michael with his jokes and a bottle of wine that was always a little too expensive. We'd crowd around the table that was too small, elbows bumping, and it was perfect. After Frank passed, these dinners became my anchor. They were the proof that our story wasn't over. And we had this shared dream, you see. Pinned right there on the kitchen wall was an old, laminated world map. Frank and I started it on our honeymoon, putting a little red pin in the cheap motel we'd stayed in. Over the years, it became our family dream board. A yellow pin for the Grand Canyon from a magazine Michael brought home in 2nd grade. A blue one for the Parisian café Sarah sketched in her journal. The centerpiece, though, was the vacation jar. A big, ceramic mason jar Frank had painted with the words "someday." It sat on the counter, and we all fed it. Loose change, the occasional $5 bill. For the big one, Michael would say, dropping in his coins with a ceremonial clink. "Crystal Shores, here we come," Sarah would add, her eyes sparkling as she described the overwater bungalows from the brochure she'd dog-eared. I lived for that dreaming. That collective someday. It wasn't about the luxury. It was about the together. The promise that after all the daily grind, we would meet each other in that beautiful place and just be a family, fully present, surrounded by that impossible blue water. I'd listen to them debate activities, snorkeling versus spa, and my heart would feel so full it could burst. I was funding that dream, quietly. My little pension bonuses, my frugal savings, all funneling into that special account, my surprise for them when the jar finally filled. I saw myself not as a bank, but as the keeper of the flame. The guardian of our someday. I remember Michael throwing an arm around my shoulders one night, smelling of soap and the outdoors, and saying, "You're the best, Mom." The human ATM. He'd meant it as a joke, a term of endearment. We'd all laughed. I'd laughed the hardest, squeezing him back. I didn't hear the subtle redefinition in those words. Not then. I only heard my son's love. I didn't see the jar slowly emptying, or notice Sarah's gaze lingering on it a little too long, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she calculated a future I wasn't part of. The change was so slow, you could almost convince yourself it was just the seasons turning. Sunday dinners became every other Sunday, then when schedules allow. The excuses were always plausible: a late work call, a child's soccer game, a headache. The table felt larger, the silence between clinks of cutlery more pronounced. Then, the vacation jar. I'd been secretly adding to it from my own savings, wanting to surprise them with how close we were to our goal. One Tuesday, filled with that secret excitement, I decided to count it. I picked it up. It was shockingly light. I poured the contents onto the table. A few lonely nickels and dimes rolled out, a single wrinkled dollar bill. The rest, the heavy, hopeful mass of coins, was gone. My heart did a strange, sinking flutter. When Sarah came by later, I asked, my voice trying for lightness. "The jar's looking a little thin, sweetheart." She didn't even flinch. "Oh, right. Michael had that emergency brake repair last month. It was like $800. He was in a bind, so we all agreed he could borrow from the jar. He's good for it." She said it while scrolling on her phone, as if discussing the weather. When I mentioned it to Michael, he echoed the story almost verbatim. "Yeah, sorry Mom, I'll top it back up." The words were right, but the feeling was all wrong. It felt rehearsed. The jar, our tangible dream, had been liquidated for a brake pad. The final straw of that season was the map. Sarah came over one weekend, full of energy, declaring my kitchen needed a refresh. Before I could process it, she had taken down our dream map, the corners of the laminate curling with memory. "This is so dated, Mom," she said, rolling it up with a brisk efficiency that felt like a dismissal. In its place, she hung a large, abstract canvas of grey and beige. Soulless. Modern. My pins, our dreams, were dumped into a cardboard box for the basement. That night, after she left, I sat in the new silence of my updated kitchen. The emptiness on the wall was a physical ache. It was the first time the thought whispered through me, cold and clear, "I am being erased." Not all at once, but in small, careful increments. The rituals, the symbols, the shared savings all were being quietly dismantled. They weren't just growing up and moving on. They were editing me out of the next chapter, and the draft they were writing had no room for a sentimental old woman and her quaint, cumbersome dreams. The lie, when it finally came, was a masterpiece of meticulous planning. It proved they knew exactly how deep the cut would go, so they took great care to make it painless. Surgical. Sarah and Michael arrived together, a united front of manufactured stress. They spun a tale of simultaneous, unavoidable work retreats. Michael's sales conference was at a no-service lodge up north. Sarah's leadership seminar was at a tech-free campus. They presented it as an exhausting, grueling obligation. They even asked for my help collecting mail, watering plants, weaving me into the fabric of their deception so I'd feel useful, so I wouldn't suspect. I offered, of course, to take the grandchildren. "Oh, we've got a wonderful nanny service booked," Sarah said quickly, too quickly. "We want you to relax, Mom. You do so much for us." The words were sweet, but they landed like stones. They'd hired a stranger so I wouldn't interfere. That was the first moment the veil truly tore. This wasn't an oversight. It was an exclusion. The motive clicked into place, cold and hard, a few days later. I still had access to the old family photo cloud, a digital attic they'd forgotten. Scrolling, I found screenshots Sarah had saved. Not of memories, but of invoices. Brochures for Crystal Shores. A detailed cost comparison chart. And a note, in her digital handwriting, that turned my blood to ice. "If we pool our bonuses and don't split cost with Mom, we can upgrade to the oceanfront villas." The word "don't" was circled. Emphasized. There it was. The cold calculus of it. I wasn't just inconvenient. I was a budgetary line item. My presence had a price tag, and that price was a superior view. They weren't leaving old, boring mom behind. They were actively trading me in. My value, to them, had been converted into a villa upgrade, premium drink packages, a more Instagrammable vacation. The family dream had become a transaction, and I was the cost they had unanimously agreed to cut. The night before they left, Sarah hugged me tight, her perfume expensive and unfamiliar. "Thank you for holding down the fort, Mom. You're the best." Over her shoulder, my eyes landed on a brochure peeking from Michael's jacket pocket. The corner of a photograph, white sand, turquoise water, crystal shores. In that moment, the hurt hardened into something else. Something sharp and observant. They thought I was blind. They thought I was simple. But a woman who has loved you your entire life knows your tells. She just chooses, for too long, to look away. I stopped looking away. I wrote the name down. I held on to it. It was the first piece of my countermove, plucked from the wreckage of their carefully constructed fiction. The week of their vacation stretched before me, a vast, silent desert of time. I performed my duties like a ghost. I entered Sarah's pristine, quiet apartment to water her ficus. The air smelled of linen spray, not of life. I collected their mail, catalogs for luxury goods, statements from banks I didn't know they used. Each envelope felt like a message from a parallel universe where I didn't exist. I tried calling. Sarah's voicemail greeted me with, "You've reached Sarah. I'm currently off-grid at a strategic planning summit." The lie, recorded and professional, was its own kind of slap. The silence in my own house became a physical presence, thick and suffocating. The breaking point was a simple, self-inflicted wound, curiosity. I drove to Michael's house, just to see it. And there, in the driveway, was the nanny's cheerful little car. Through the front window, I saw a young woman I didn't know, blowing bubbles for my grandson, Leo. His laughter was muffled by the glass. They were happy. They were fine. They had everything they needed, and none of it was me. I drove home with a tremor in my hands that wouldn't stop. That evening, I went down to the basement. I found the box. I hauled our dream map upstairs, unrolled it across the living room floor, the old laminate cracking. I knelt amidst the scattered pins of our discarded somedays. And then I found it, the tiny, blue gem pin I'd pressed into the spot for crystal shores years ago, a joke that had become a promise. I held it in my palm, this cheap, sparkling trinket. And that's when it all came crashing down. The sobs weren't quiet. They were wrenching, ugly things torn from a place I thought had dried up. I wasn't crying for the palm trees or the spa. I was weeping for the death of the story. The story of us saving together, dreaming together. That story was a lie. The map was just colored plastic. The jar was empty. And I was a foolish old woman who had built a shrine to a fantasy. The loneliness wasn't about being alone in the house. It was the devastating realization that I had been alone in that cherished memory for a long, long time. The family I was grieving for hadn't existed for years. I had just been too afraid to turn on the lights and see they'd already left the room. I cried until I was hollow, a vessel filled with nothing but the echo of my own navet. Exhausted, I fell asleep right there on the floor, clutching that blue pin, a shipwreck survivor clinging to a piece of driftwood from a sunken ship. I woke on the floor at dawn, stiff and emptied out. The blue pin was still in my hand, its edges leaving a tiny mark on my palm. The grief had burned itself out, leaving behind a bed of cold, grey ash. And from that ash, a single, clear thought arose. No. I made coffee. Then, with steady hands, I called the number from the resort's website. When the cheerful voice answered, "Crystal Shores, this is Alara," I didn't falter. I became the slightly flustered, doting grandmother. "Oh, hello. My daughter, Sarah Evans, is so terribly busy with work, she asked me to just double-check a few details for the family's upcoming stay. You know how mothers worry." I could hear Alara's smile through the phone. And she told me everything. She confirmed the dates, the exact week of their work retreats. She read back the reservation, the oceanfront villa package, the premium all-inclusive bracelets, the kids' club passes for all 3 grandchildren, romantic dinner bookings for the couples. She even verified the deposit was made with a card ending in the numbers I knew belonged to Michael. Each detail was a precise, professional nail in the coffin of their lie. My family was quantified into a line item, a confirmation code. The betrayal was no longer an emotional wound, it was a data set. I thanked Ilara profusely. I hung up. And I didn't cry. I got angry. A clean, sharp, focusing anger. It was the anger of a woman who has finally seen the blueprint of her own dismissal. And then I remembered my secret. The surprise fund. The $15,000 I'd squirreled away in a separate account, the money I'd dreamed of using to upgrade their trip, to make our someday spectacular. My love fund. It sat there, untouched. A weapon they had unknowingly funded through years of my quiet sacrifice. I called back. This time, I asked for a manager. My voice changed, it became Sarah's voice, the brisk, competent tone I knew so well. Regarding the Evans reservation, I said. I have some questions about your policies. Cancellation windows. Upgrade pathways. I learned about Platinum guest status, an elite tier that offered incredible perks but required a single, primary point of contact for billing and authorizations. A light bulb, cold and brilliant, switched on in the dark of my mind. I logged into my secret savings account. The balance glowed on the screen, $15,672.48. It was no longer a fund for a shared dream. It was a war chest. They had booked the vacation I taught them to dream of. They had used my exclusion to pay for their upgrade. And now, with the very money I'd saved for them, I would buy my way back into the picture. Not as a guest, but as the director. The power was no longer in crying over their lie, it was in using their own reservation as the instrument of their comeuppance. The morning after the call with Ilara, I tried to find normalcy in my garden. But my hands, usually so sure among the stems, were shaking. The betrayal had two layers now, the act itself, and the meticulous, condescending lie they'd constructed to treat me like a simpleton who couldn't handle the truth. That was the deeper insult. And then my phone rang again. It was Ilara, just following up warmly, hoping the information helped. As I listened to her kind voice, my iPad, sitting on the garden table, erupted. The harsh, jarring ring of a Facetime call. Sarah. My thumb instinctively moved to answer, a mother's muscle memory, but my eyes caught the thumbnail preview. It was a punch to the solar plexus. There was Sarah, in a sleek straw hat and large sunglasses, holding a colorful drink with a tiny umbrella. Michael, shirtless and grinning, giving a thumbs up to the person holding the phone. My grandchildren in the background, building a sandcastle, their little backs tan. And behind it all, the stunning, unmistakable backdrop of crystal shores, the pristine beach, the iconic thatched roof palapas, the water a shade of blue I'd only seen on our dream map. It was a live postcard of happiness, and I had been deliberately cropped out of the frame. I let it ring. I watched the thumbnail pulse with their oblivious joy until it vanished, replaced by the cold notification, missed call. A second later, a text banner slid across the screen. From Sarah. Hey Mom. Just tried to video call. Spotty service here at the conference center. Hope you're okay. Everything good with the house? The lie. Even now. Even with the evidence of paradise glowing on my screen, she maintained the fiction. The conference center. The spotty service. That text was the final, unforgivable gesture. It wasn't just cruelty, it was contempt. They truly believed I was so old, so gullible, so pathetically eager to believe them that I would accept this flimsy story while staring at their perfect vacation. I didn't cry. I looked down at my shears. I reached for a geranium stem, one with a spent, brown bloom. I didn't gently pinch it. I snipped it off with a decisive, clean snick. The dead head fell to the soil. In that thumbnail, I hadn't seen my family. I'd seen strangers luxuriating in the shade of a tree I'd spent a lifetime watering. They'd not only forgotten the gardener, they'd paved over the roots and built a cabana. That text proved they thought I couldn't see the concrete. This was the moment the last vestige of hope died. The love didn't turn to hate. It evaporated entirely, leaving behind a vacuum, a perfect, still space for something else to grow. This was the moment I knew I wouldn't cry anymore. I would act. I would not be the punchline of their joke. I would become the twist in their story. I deleted the missed call notification. Then I opened my laptop, found the resort's contact form, and began to type, the keys clicking with a new, purposeful rhythm in the quiet morning air. My revenge was not a shout. It was a series of perfectly executed, administrative keystrokes. First, I called Crystal Shaw's back. Speaking as the gracious, slightly forgetful grandmother, I explained we wanted to surprise the family. I upgraded their entire reservation to platinum status, authorizing the substantial fee from my secret savings. This did 3 things. It unlocked a world of exclusive perks, it made me the sole billing authority for all room charges, and it triggered a confirmation email to Sarah's inbox. Let them puzzle over that first. Next, I used the in-room gifting service. I sent a lavish basket of tropical fruit and vintage champagne to their villa. The note read, "To my dearest children, hope your work retreat is productive. Enjoy the upgrade. Love, Mom." I pictured them receiving it. The confusion, the dawning horror behind the sunglasses. That note was my first chess move, placed right in the center of their board. Then, the real fun began. As the platinum contact, I began authorizing experiences. A private catamaran snorkeling trip at sunset. A 5-course chef's table dinner on the beach. Deep tissue couples massages at the spa. Each amenity was charged seamlessly to their room. I wasn't just spending my money, I was weaponizing their own vacation against them. Every sip of premium champagne, every bite of gourmet food would now taste of confrontation. Would they dare to refuse? Or would they consume their guilt, bite by luxurious bite? Simultaneously, I called the resort's kids club. As their devoted nana, I arranged a special, paid pirate adventure day for my grandchildren, treasure maps, face paint, the works. I made sure they would be deliriously happy and safely occupied. My love for them was the one thing I wouldn't taint, I simply redirected it, ensuring their joy was separate from their parents' unraveling. The final piece was for me. I navigated to the resort's last-minute getaway page, an offer Ilara had mentioned. With a few clicks, I booked a flight and a modest garden view suite for myself, for the final 2 nights of their stay. The discounted rate felt like poetic justice. I packed a suitcase not with grief, but with a quiet sense of mission. I included a linen dress Frank had bought me years ago in Nassau, a dress I'd never had the occasion to wear. It was time. As I zipped the bag closed, I looked at my reflection. The woman who cried on the floor was gone. In her place was someone quieter, straighter, with a glint of steely resolve in her eyes. The victim had checked out. The orchestrator was ready to check in. I arrived at Crystal Shores as the sun began its afternoon descent, gilding the lobby in honeyed light. I was calm. I checked into my garden view room, changed into the linen dress from Nassau, and felt Frank's memory like a cloak of strength. Then, I went to the open-air lounge, the one with the panoramic view of the sunset over the water. I ordered a cocktail I couldn't pronounce and waited. I didn't have to wait long. They entered as a noisy, happy pack, sun-bleached and relaxed, their laughter preceding them. Sarah, Michael, their spouses all still glowing from their day of platinum-funded bliss. The laughter died the moment they saw me. It didn't taper off, it was severed. Sarah's sunglasses slid down her nose. Michael's jaw went slack. The tableau of shock was more satisfying than any shouted accusation. I simply raised my glass in a small, silent toast from my solitary table. The power in that gesture was absolute. They were forced to cross the room, their vacation paradise suddenly feeling like a tribunal. The spluttered explanations began, "Mom, what, how," a jumble of lies trying to reform but crumbling on their tongues. I let them flounder. I took a slow sip of my drink, the ice clinking softly. "The weather has been lovely, hasn't it?" I finally said, my voice serene. "I've so enjoyed the platinum perks. I do hope you have, too." I let the statement hang, a grenade with the pin already pulled. I offered no explanation, no emotional payoff. The mystery of my presence, coupled with the dawning realization of how I'd accomplished it, was my revenge. I spent the next 2 days in peaceful solitude. I read by the adult-only pool. I took a long walk on the beach at dawn. I was courteous but distant when our paths crossed. They, however, were trapped in a gilded cage of their own making, jumping at every room charge slip, their perfect vacation now poisoned by a looming, inexplicable bill and a mother who looked at them not with hurt, but with a profound, unanswerable calm. I learned that you cannot force your way into someone else's story. But you can absolutely close that book and write a far better one for yourself. They believed cutting me from the picture would make their postcard perfect. Instead, I walked into the frame and became the focal point, the detail that changed the entire meaning of the scene. Never, ever let someone make you a footnote in your own life. If they exclude you from their vacation, book your own adventure. If they dismiss your dreams, finance your own. Your joy, your peace, your dignity, these are not group activities that require a committee vote or an invitation. They are your sovereign territory. That secret savings account didn't buy me a family vacation. It bought me something infinitely more valuable, a revelation. It purchased the clarity that I am whole without their validation, and that a quiet woman with a plan is the most formidable force on earth. The money wasn't wasted. It was the tuition for the most important lesson of my life, how to be the author, not just a character waiting for her lines. As for the dream map, I'm thinking of starting a new one. Just a simple sketch, really. With a single, bold pin somewhere they'd never think to look. Somewhere just for me. Because someday is now, and it tastes like peace, and it is all-inclusive.